go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Board of County Commissioners Workshop, February 15th at 1:30, and our transportation is our subject today. Roger, you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Annually, we, during the budget process, we talked to you about the capital improvement budget, which includes an awful lot of transportation projects, and then sometime during the year, we'll then have a conversation about priorities and costs and those things. So today's that day. We'd like to talk with you about all the transportation projects in 3 tiers and projected cost increases and your priorities. So I'm going to turn it right over to Dave Loveland. That was a question, Dave. Yes, Dave. That's what I thought.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. And this is going to be a tag team presentation with DOT Director Randy Searchy. He's going to be part of this as well. We appreciate all the assistance from County Administration in pulling this presentation together. As Roger mentioned, this is a process we do every year, looking at the transportation priorities, seeing if the board wants to update anything as we feed into the capital improvement programming process that DOT does, balancing all these projects and project costs against the available revenues. So we're going to be talking about the recommended priorities today, so the cost increases in the Tier 1 project, which is the primary focus, the shorter term projects, and then some possible financing options. So the questions that we'll pose to you at the end: do you concur with the proposed priorities as we present them today, and do you have any other questions or input on this as we go along? Just as a reminder, we started the transportation priority list in 2015. Prior to that, and what kind of led to creating the priority list, was we had 4 main project priorities that the board had identified back in 2013. And we had come to the board with a question, we're not sure we can fund all these. What do you think are important? And the board said all of them are important. And so we proceeded to move forward with trying to program all of those. And the good news is, of these 4 projects, the Alico Road 4-lane is done. The Homestead Road 4-lane segment from Sunshine up to Homestead, or up to Lee Boulevard, is done. Leland Heights Boulevard, excuse me. The Burnstone Road 4-lane, the first 2 segments are complete, and the 3rd segment is under construction at this point in time. And the Estero Boulevard reconstruction, which has been a long-term project, is going to be finished at the end of next month. We have a ribbon cutting scheduled for that. Just as a reminder, and one of the reasons that prioritization is so important when you're dealing with these transportation projects, you have multiple phases for these, and each phase can take many months, sometimes years to complete, and cost millions of dollars. So it's important to have an idea of what we want in the pipeline and how to work things through the pipeline from a prioritization standpoint. We have the planning efforts up front, both short-term and long-term planning, scoping these projects. Sometimes there's project development environmental studies that are done to address a lot of environmental issues. We don't typically do those for county projects. They have to be done for anything that requires federal funding or is going to utilize federal funding. Design phase, we get into the design and the permitting and the right-of-way acquisition, which can take a significant amount of time. And then we get to the construction phase, and we have options on some of the delivery methods. So for the prioritization process this year, we're going to be dealing with some significant cost increases for the Tier 1 projects, which Randy's going to discuss in detail. But because of that, we're suggesting very minimal changes to the priority list this year. So the focus in the programming process will be trying to do what we can to maintain the schedules for the projects in Tier 1. We're really only proposing for Tier 1 to make 2 adjustments, dropping the Estero Boulevard project because, again, that project is going to be complete next month, and moving 1 project down from Tier 1 to Tier 2, the Veterans Parkway 6-lane phase. We had adjusted the scoring. There was an error the level service calculations there, and we've corrected that, and it warrants being more in Tier 2 rather than Tier 1. And we're proposing 2 additions to the priority list, but one of them in Tier 2, one of them in Tier 3, so they wouldn't affect Tier 1. As a reminder, we have a number of ranking criteria we utilize just as a way to try to get at a relative order for these projects. We have scores associated with each of these different topic areas. There's a focus on maintaining our existing system, on the level of service conditions. Safety is always a big focus. Whether we're getting funds from other sources affects the scoring. And again, this is we keep it at a kind of a macro level in terms of this scoring to give us a relative order, because the final order is ultimately determined by the board. So looking to Tier 1, this identifies the projects currently in Tier 1 and the recommended priorities that we're suggesting for those projects going forward. So the order remains exactly the same as it is today. We're identifying, as I said, the Estero Boulevard improvements coming off of the list as they're going to be completed. And then the Veterans Parkway project, which was number 13, shifting down into Tier 2 with the adjusted score. As you can see, just Tier 1 by itself is a significant number of projects and significant cost commitment. You're looking at $1.2 billion worth of total project costs. And these cost estimates that we've got in here reflect some of the cost increases that we were expecting in the Tier 1 projects. So looking a little deeper into Tier 1 then, this is what the list would look like after you remove Estero Boulevard and drop Veterans Parkway down on the list. You know, you've got a total commitment in the CIP at this point of about $619 million. This column adds, or this slide adds a column which identifies the potential revenue sources for each of the projects and an estimated construction date. But that is going to be subject to DOT's process to balance the available revenues against the projects and the cost increases. So they'll be working through that process over the next few months. There'll be a draft CIP that will come back to the board, I believe in June or May or June? May, yeah, okay. So as DOT is working through that process, the timing of some of this may change somewhat, but the effort is going to be to try to maintain the timing of these projects and keep them going forward. The action you took earlier today to approve moving forward with a $100 million gas tax bond is going to go a long way toward helping maintain that as well. Moving on to Tier 2 then, this would shows what we're recommending in relation to Tier 2. The same relative order for the Tier 2 projects, with the Veterans Parkway moved down to number 19, and a new project added here. This is the Corkscrew Road 4-lane project from Maliko Road going east to the Verdana Village, which we've been talking about for the last few months. The MPO just recently made it part of the long-range plan, and the board has authorized us to incorporate it into the Lee County Comprehensive Plan. And so we're suggesting that it also be added to the priority list in Tier 2 based on the scoring.
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
On the prior slide, we have Colonial and Summer on the flyover. Can you go back to that prior slide? So I'm just trying to verify some stuff just based upon questions from the community. So Colonial and Summer on flyover at Midpoint Bridge, total project $193 million. I know we don't have a time set for that yet or anything, but so Colonial is a state road, 884, correct?
It is to 41. The segment between McGregor and US 41 is county road.
That's what I was trying to verify. That's what I was, okay. So that part is county. So it's all our responsibility, and then Summer is ours. So that's the question I was getting from some residents. People know that Colonial used to be, but I couldn't remember what year that got switched over. So Summer and Colonial intersections are, even though it's in the city of Fort Myers, the city has no funding responsibility here, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
they had a commitment to maintain the landscaping at one time, but that's no longer in effect.
What was the history there? Why did the county took over Colonial from 41 to McGregor? Was that done with the original flyover there at 41 and Boy Scout? I mean,
Yes, that
41 and Colonial 20 years ago, whatever
Yeah,
it was?
it was all part of the Midpoint Bridge, which opened in 1997, I want to say. As part of that Midpoint Bridge project, we carried the road over McGregor, and then we made some improvements, and we actually widened Colonial all the way to 41, and then added the overpass at 41, so that was all part of that.
60/40 split with the city of Cape Coral for the tolls, the 60/40, I think it is. They get so much, so we use that for funding Veterans Parkway continuing westbound too. Does that also flow under the Colonial and Summerlin Midpoint flyover? Would that be funded from that too, from the tolls?
All of that extension of Veterans Parkway and future widening has been toll funded. Yes, it's all eligible under the agreement that we have.
Okay, thank you.
So again, these are the Tier 2 projects, and under this arrangement with the shift of veterans and the new project, you're looking at $344 million worth of projects in Tier 2. And then Tier 3, we've maintained the same relative order for the projects on there, with the addition of one other new project, the Sunshine Boulevard widening, which we're showing from State Road 82 to Lee Boulevard. This is related to the Alico extension, because the Alico extension is going to come up to State Road 82 and line up with Sunshine Boulevard. And so once that's completed, that's going to create additional demand on Sunshine. Randy's indicated to me that it looks like we probably are going to have to widen part of Sunshine as part of that Alico project. So this project limit is likely going to change to be from 23rd Street up to Lee Boulevard for this Tier 3 priority.
Roger?
Hey, Dave, will you please remind us the projected timing for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 projects?
Okay. Basically, the overall list with 28, 29 projects on it represent more or less a 30-year kind of list. So Tier 1 focuses on trying to get those completed not only, at least partially within the 5-year window of our CIP, but more like a 10-year window. Tier 2 would be the 10 to 20-year window, and Tier 3 would really be the 20 to 30-year window.
I think that's something really important to remember, because when we were talking about, you were talking about earlier about Corkscrew Road widening from Alico east out past Verdana. I know we're already getting conversations already started with the community out there is concerned about safety. We understand that. I understand the trucks are going to be out there no matter what, because it's a public road. The trucks have to have access to that road. But with the future development coming out there, with that between the prop share and the impact fees coming in there, we're going to probably see a need faster on that one. I think we're all hearing that, because that's still a 2-lane farm road out there beyond the Alico. So.
I will say DOT, Randy, you want to take that?
We're entertaining a public-private partnership right now with one firm building the development immediately east of what's the name of that development? FFD. And also another developer on the far east end of that, far east end of Corkscrew. We're entertaining some work there with him too, so it may happen faster than anticipated here, getting Corkscrew wide.
Step 1 would be getting it on the priority list, so it's clearly indicated as a board priority, and then we would continue to work on the timing as funds are available.
And phase 1 now, they're on schedule now. That's the question we get a lot of, and I've been telling them there's some phase 1, and we're trying to get that message out there and just trying to, they are on schedule. We had a couple weather events, but otherwise they're on schedule there. Okay. Any questions from the board?
Can you go back to phase 1?
Sure. Mike.
But I guess from a macro point of view.
Your mic, please.
So, sorry. I guess from a macro point of view, I don't know how many people really appreciate the 70s, but I was certainly around during the 70s. We're going through some hyper inflation at the moment. Costs are running out of control at this point in time. What percentage of increase are we experiencing on some of these projects?
Go ahead, Randy.
Over the years, we've experienced about a 3% increase. In other words, you don't build a job this year, you wait till next year, it's about 3%. Engineering News Record confirmed that, generally nationwide, it's about a 3% increase. The Atlanta metropolitan area is the largest metropolitan area near us for us to gauge on. Earlier this year, they're seeing an 8% increase, so there's an anomaly happening at the moment.
I guess that's my point, and looking at some of these costs, I mean, I know it was ambitious in 2013 to try to do some of the things you do, but I think we're going to go through an experience over the next 12 to 24 months that I don't know that I would really want to be building. Whatever we're committed to, we need to commit to and continue to, but I think we really have to pause and really kind of hit the brakes and look at this and start to look at funding sources, start to understand the costs, start to understand how we're going to come into this. My concern is that we're going to commit to so many projects and we're going to run out of funding sources in general. I don't know if anyone else shares that concern.
Well, I mean, like I was saying, for example, Corkscrew with if there's other developments we don't even know about coming in the future, they're coming in, we can get prop share. I know gas taxes will be really be less of a funding source, but gas tax with prop share and impact fees coming from the things that's not even broke ground yet. May not even be there yet. When they're coming in, there's future funding for the future, you know, it may be 10 years out, but it's going to be something there that we'll be able to start the project day one with that, because that's money coming after they break ground. For like the place, I think we did that with the place. I don't know if Randy or Pete wants to talk about that, or the place, for example, the prop share came in for that, and that helped fund some of these projects on tier one, I believe.
The proportionate share money that the place paid over and above impact fees has been fed into the Corkscrew Road widening project that's underway right now.
Mr. Chair? This question for Pete, Dave, Randy. Given all the revenue sources and considering the cost of inflation, I know you guys are working on this, you can't give a precise answer at the moment. Do we anticipate having enough dollars to do all of the tier one projects over the next 10 years, given the current circumstance?
It's
Good, Pete.
So we're trying to be really creative, but it's going to be very tight. And so there are some pieces that have to come together. One of those being we are going to probably come back to the board to request some ARPA money, some ARPA infrastructure money to help pay for the Big Carlos Bridge project. That frees up some surplus toll revenues for the road extension project. But yeah, in tier one, you'll see later, and Randy will go through this, we're based on projections. Now, these projections are all the way up to construction date for these projects, but the tier one costs have gone up $269 million. So that's more than 8%. Will that come back down in future years? Yes, hopefully. But yeah, it's a very tight model right now. And we will maximize all resources we have. I mean, we still have some bonding capacity with some other revenue streams. There are certain things we can do with growth increment funding. The board can choose to maybe increase that. We have a methodology for it, or they could double that in any given year to allocate to construction projects. But you're right, Commissioner. It's the way it looks now. It'll be very tight.
I guess I look at this and knowing the different revenue streams that we have, impact fees, GIF, tolls, gas tax, excess reserves. I mean, we go through all those. That's great, and I appreciate us being creative. At some point in time, we're going to have a project and we're not going to have a funding source. That's my biggest concern when you look globally. And I hear 3%, I hear 8%. And I remember all too vividly, whether it was construction design, whether it was floors, the Senate costs were supposed to be $100 million. By the time we were done, it was $141 million. That was a price when steel and everything was going out of control after Charlie. I think we're in a period right now that's even worse than that. So my concern is that we build all these expenses and then try to match the revenues after the fact. It's not necessarily something that I look forward to. So I would really want to understand the project, the funding source, really have clarity as best we could. And I think we as a board have a responsibility to do the projects we need to do, commit to what we need to do, but make a hard look at what projects certainly have a gap or potential concern or lack of a funding source, and really kind of identify those. That's just the reality of what we're dealing with, and in my opinion, and it's my opinion, I think we're in unprecedented times that none of us have really seen. And my concern with the demand, as hyper as it is right now, I don't know how you continue to project accurately, and that's my concern.
I have the same concerns you do, and like, I think hopefully how long it takes to build some of these projects, the market will change. Market changes based upon financially, and also the demand and the materials and the job force changes too, to bring it back in more reality. So that's the thing we have to look at. And as far as funding, like you said, so many different lines of funding, be a challenge. But we have to still I still think we have to have a vision where we want to be at 5, 10, 20 years now, because everybody moving here, we're dealt with having to provide the infrastructure. And just one thing I was going to ask a question. Pete, you're talking about growth increment funding. It's been pretty much the same over the last 4 years as far as the funding source of growth increment funding. With the high cost of housing now, houses that we're selling for $300,000 now for $600,000. We're seeing a lot of sales and transfers. So are we going to see a larger increase of growth increment funding over the next year when the appraisals come in? Because those houses that were $300,000 now they're selling for $600,000 or $800,000. That's our extra revenue, that extra taxation we're going to capture that first year through growth increment funding. Do you have any calculations of what that could be based upon what's happened over the last year?
Yeah, so the growth increment funding for this coming budget is 13.8 million. I think last year it was either 10.5 or 11.3, something like that.
One year was 7 million, I think, yeah.
What's that?
One year I think it was 7 or 8 million.
Correct, yeah. So a lot, it's not only your new construction, but if you have a lot of sales back and forth, that increases your growth increment because you're capturing the reset of the.
And that's not going to fund a $100
Save our homes.
million bridge or a $120 million road project, but it's a funding source to help get through the P&E study or get us through at least design or acquisition phase. And hopefully by that time, over the next 5 years, the market will sustain a little bit, pull back a little bit. I don't know if costs will go down that much or not. We'll see what happens over the next couple of years, but there's some things we can't control, and that's one of them. There is the prices.
With your growth increment funding, the board has the flexibility. It's a methodology that's based on new construction and sales back and forth and that reset of the sales
that's
of homes. But the board in any given year can say, oh, it's 13.8 million. Why don't we see if we can put in 24 million? Or, the board can.
That's what I'm saying. It's not tied, so we're not tied to like impact fees restricted. So there's unrestricted funds. We can dedicate that money for this project, for example. So impact fees are obviously we're handcuffed now from the state side about raising those fees up to a certain amount, but those are restricted, but this is unrestricted. That's why I've always said I'm supportive of using that money for that, or even our reserves. We have nearly dedicated reserves, non-dedicated reserves to use that for some of these projects. Pick out which ones you want to get completed first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at this in a really peel it back as best we can, look at the project, understand the funding source, and understand the reality of where the funding source is, just so we have identified each project and tried to really hone in on the particular project. I want to continue to do everything we do. The fear is at some point in time, if we have 29 projects, we're going to tap the brakes sometime, let the costs run at the way they're running, and hopefully just delay it a year or two and not buy into 30 or 40% inflation, because that's basically what I experienced in the Santa Barbara Causeway.
So I was trying to see if I could put together everything that I'm hearing. So are you saying with the tier 1 projects, the concern is, if I'm hearing it right, that we have this big list of, I think it's potentially 12 projects, 12 on tier 1, but we wouldn't have the money by the end of the 10-year period to get all 12 done. And so it's kind of like we're making a commitment, but it's not a completely funded commitment. Is that what I'm hearing right now?
I don't know, Commissioner, what I'm looking for is the 12 projects. Let's really peel that back as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Okay, the project is $154 million. Great. It's going to come from gas, and we specifically have that one. Check. Okay. Projected revenues. Okay. Next project gonna come from GIF, check. But just look at them a little deeper.
Yeah.
A little bit more specific, peel it back a little bit more, because to your point, what our concern is, what I think this board does, is we just don't want to be in a commitment level.
Right.
Where we're out of funds, okay, and then we have to do something like, raise taxes, or do something that we didn't envision doing. That might be a good reason to do it, but let's make that decision as we go through and understand this, so we make the informed decision. And it's not like, the credit card bill comes in and we can't pay it.
I hear what you're saying. Okay, yeah, no,
That's my concern.
I'm glad I got a chance to understand that. Okay, so one of the things I was thinking about asking as we were going through the presentation today was we have had as a board the Tier 1 for several years now, right? And so that's always been kind of the aspirational document. Here's our Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. These are the things that we aspire to build. But what's kind of written on top of that is the slide that they showed us with the Alico Road, Burnstore Road, Estero Boulevard, and Homestead Road. These were the 4 that we really committed to getting done. And I guess my question to you all in the administration is, would it be helpful for us to, now that Alico Road is finished, Estero Boulevard's finished, Burnstore's coming to a close, Homestead's, I guess that's done as well, would it be helpful to try and identify almost that level of projects, and maybe another top 4 that rides kind of above the Tier 1 projects, so you know which ones to really focus on? So Tier 1's still aspirational, this is what we want to get done, but these are the 4 we're really putting our...
Mr. Chair? So, Commissioners, as Dave showed you in one of the earlier slides, in 2013, the County Commission made a commitment for those four road projects, and we're nearing the end of all of them. So the question now is, on these Tier 1s, and we have not considered these aspirational more so than these are our marching orders.
Okay, yeah.
Get these projects, these 10 or 12 projects, in the ground over the next 10 years. The concern, of course, that you all have expressed today on having to deal with inflation. If we're at 8% and it's compounded annually, it doesn't take long, for that to become a really big number. So in the unfunded balance column there, you see it's about $500 million. If you were so inclined to give us the top, get these in an absolute order of priority, and then we can show you the dollars that we're fairly certain of over the next several years, 5 years perhaps, we could probably show you what we feel really comfortable in committing to. And then everything below that number, it depends on inflation, revenues, and those kinds of things.
I mean, that's kind of what was in my head. And I don't know who was here in 13, Frank was, but Cecil was, you were in the infancy stages of your, Brian and Cecil, I mean, these projects, I'm sure a lot of it was in the making when you got on board, no different than the way I am today.
Back in 05, I think it was, 04,
Yeah.
05.
So, I mean, like this morning, one of the reasons that I brought up by analogy, okay, when we're talking about gas tax, and I was talking about covenants, in my world, and that's kind of the world I live in, we try to push the covenant as much as you possibly can. So if the covenant comes in at 150 and we can go to 175 if they're comfortable, we have the opportunity to bond more money, okay, at a very low interest rate. So I want to try to be as creative, and Pete, great at what you're doing. GIF, you guys were geniuses, and the public has vilified you guys, but it was a great tool because people don't understand the limitations with impact fees. I want to look at every source we have and maximize those and create it and do what we can. Tolls are a great revenue source. You know what, and we're at record highs, so we're having people come over the causeway. I lived with the Sandoval Causeway. 120 was the coverage. We're at 176. So, okay, you know what, let's not push it to the envelope, but let's maybe take it to 150. How much more money does that give us? And start to say, okay, here's GIF, here's sales tax, here's some tolls, here's some of the things we could do, and here's some creative with reserves. I just want to peel the onion back a little bit further and just try to make sure we look at this as close as we can. No one's got a crystal ball, but it's, again, from a methodology, the world I live in, I've borrowed and leveraged money my entire life. And I don't have a problem doing it as long as we make an informed decision. And I know, I respect you all, and it's great to be the new member of the team. I'm just giving it a fresh pair of eyes. Just let's do the projects we need to. Let's really just peel it back as much as possible. If there's any direction, as much information as we possibly can. We could have a robust conversation. Because collectively, I love our dialogue. I love what took place in the first year and a half. I really do enjoy, and I think we have the capability of giving clear direction. The direction just may have changed a little bit, considering inflation.
I think we did that last year. If you remember in our strategic plan last year, we talked about in a workshop, we did away with the PD study for the Lico Road extension out to 82. That saved 7 years, a lot of money, a lot of money. I think, you know, staff's trying now to go through the process. Any way we can save $1, they're looking at that as far as either acquisition or if it's this studies or designs or anything. I know they're working that way now, trying to get that stuff done.
But this is the only time we have an opportunity to talk, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Definitely. Mr. Sindelli?
A couple things. One is, obviously, we'd all like to get everything done, and I think as the discussion has led us to this, probably impractical, given the circumstances, you know, today. So I think looking at how these things are timed, you know, gives us a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of pushback, whether it's 12 months or 24 months. The money part, as we just talked about, there's some alternative ways, and we need to aggregate that. But I think the other thing is, I think in terms a little bit differently, and that's, I always say, it takes patience, you know, to get these roads done. So when I drive around, I'm looking at where the issues are, that patience gets taxed because it affects our quality of life. I-75, which is not our road, but it's critical to Southwest Florida. And when I come to work in the morning and I see that traffic lined up forever, I go, how do you start your day that way? And that's affecting somebody, it's affecting their quality of life. It's not our road per se, but I think from a priority perspective, the venues that we're looking at that go north and south, that are our roads, to me are critical, because it alleviates some of the traffic over time off of 75. It affects quality of life and stuff like that. I think that's got to play in there somehow. So it's a nuance, but it's important.
I think that's what you see. I think things are done before any of us were here 20 years ago, 10 years ago. These projects are north and south and east and west. I mean, not just saying because where it's located, but that I've been preaching all along, this Alico extension out to 82, getting that eastbound traffic off of Colonial, off of Daniels, off of Corkscrew, the trucks off of Corkscrew. The Alico connector out to 82 is going to be one of the major changes in the transportation grid for the whole network, because everybody that works in Collier County and South Lee County lives in Lehigh Acres and East Lee County. You go out there in the mornings at 7 a.m., 6 o'clock in the morning, all the traffic comes from East Lee County, and they're all going south to Collier. You're seeing the traffic in the mornings coming from Bonita. But that's where the workforce is. We've always been the bedroom community for Collier County, and we're more now than ever based upon the cost of living in Collier County.
Is that east-west connectors and stuff like this. We know where the growth is going because there's land there. And
We see it in the Cape. I mean, Fisher Embassies every morning. People come from east to west. That's unfortunate. We so much urban sprawl. Everybody's going east to west to go to work every day, and it's just we have to contend with that traffic network now. But it's just it's costly, and our commute shouldn't be that long here, but it is because of all the urban sprawl we've created.
Well, I was glad you mentioned I-75 though, because I feel like you opened the door to an idea that I've wanted to share with y'all for a while to kind of see if you're interested in working on is, so I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the five of us at the MPO, at the Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting. So, you know, all five of us get a chance to vote there on that board on ranking and prioritizing those projects. You know, what are your thoughts on the idea of having a workshop here at the commission level looking at the MPO's priority list and seeing if we agree with those priorities for the county, because we are elected countywide. It's our job to make decisions countywide. And then if we see some changes and tweaks that need to be made at the MPO, then the five of us go to those MPO meetings fully informed with a real strategy to try and make sure we get projects ranked in a way that's going to improve our traffic network, especially with an eye towards easing congestion.
Right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Commissioners, let's go back in time just a little bit, please. If you'll recall, in 2013, our priority list was really based on the MPO's list back then. and with input from, all the cities, Lee County, and FDOT. And at that time, you all said, listen, that's not, those aren't the most important projects to us. And that's how we ended up with this tier system. You asked us to come back with a ranking system so that you could decide on what roads were most important to you, as you see it, where we would be programming county funding resources. So we did that. We created this scoring mechanism, and that's how you get to the tier 1, 2, 3 today. At the same time, you also gave us permission to take all of the funding sources that we have available to us under your control and use them in the most efficient way possible, given that some are restricted, some are partially restricted, and then some are unrestricted. So that's how we come up with the sort of the mix of funding sources for all of this. Now, with all of that conversation, we also said, and you agreed, that at any time, if, as a board, you can change these priorities as you see fit. You don't have to stick necessarily to the scoring system. If traffic is impeding growth or is causing the pain points in other parts of the county, you can adjust that if you want. Now, if that's what you'd like to do, I'm sort of hearing a little that sounds like that. If that's what you'd like to do, then we can go back to the same process we used in 2013, which is you tell us what your top few priorities are, and that we'll figure out the funding for that and show you some scenarios.
And I think my point is that we can look within the confines of what we control.
Yes.
There's some things that we can't control. We know where the residential's going, we know where the commercial's going, and we're watching the impact of that, right now. And so I do think that part of this is reprioritizing somewhat, so that we get to those choke points. As Chairman said before, or Kevin said before, is that the things are changing, and they're changing at a pace that it's causing us a real challenge.
Well, and the point I was trying to make was, we do a really good job. I'm really pleased with the way we handle county roads and roads that are under our area of responsibility. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about I-75 or roads that are not under our area of responsibility, yet they're still within our county. Like Pine Island Road is a state road, right? I would love to sit with you all and talk about Pine Island Road. It is a parking lot. It really is. And if the 5 of us could help come up with some ideas on what we would love to promote at the MPO, that would be great, because then the 5 of us could go in there with one voice and talk about it. And if there are roads in your district that are state roads that are parking lots, I think it'd be great for us to have a workshop and talk about some of those roads that aren't necessarily under our jurisdiction, but yet we do have a vote on at the MPO level. But no, I wasn't trying to invite them into our process. I like what we talk about with county roads. We actually are doing a really good job of ranking the ones that we're going to make the final call on.
Actually, anything's done.
I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner. So, I love the approach. I love what we all do here. And Roger, I think you summarized it great. The only tweak I would do, and Commissioner Sandelli said, is sometimes we might have a scoring system, necessary quality of life, we look at things, but there might be a funding source like the tolls that drive the project a lot quicker just because it pays for itself. We're not going into a source, and unfortunately I can use that in the most creative way to pay for the tolls and the roads going there, but that's about where I stop. I can't go any further. That might elevate a little bit quicker just because it's an easy funding source. We might come to one of these projects and say, okay, great, we're out of GIF, we're out of gas, we're out of this, we're out of that. How are we going to get done? And that might just be, let's pause and wait, because I am concerned about the hyper growth we're going through, but it's more the hyperinflation we're going through. And that's really just a concern in general. And I'm way ahead of the slides, so this whole conversation is probably 7 deep, and I apologize, Dave. I did some advanced preparation, and just as my mind processed this globally, just to try to say, okay, how do we do this? So, but I think you summarized it well, Roger. Thank you.
Dave?
Yes, sir.
I think I stopped you 30 minutes ago with one question. We never stopped talking. So, if you remember where you're at, go ahead. Actually, you were on Tier 2 projects, actually, when I had you go back. So,
yeah, I think I'd actually gotten to Tier 3. And, surprisingly enough, once I get past that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy at this point.
oh, you mean you were just waiting to leave just that quick, huh? Why Randy was sitting there impatiently waiting to get up.
And this slide is probably what caused me to start to talk about the way I did. 269 million increase.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Going through here's I'll go through them rather quickly. To read in the box, the budgeted estimate is what is in the project now, what you approved last year. The updated estimate, we have our consultants or our engineers update every year at this time of year to give a new cost estimate, a current cost estimate. I don't know if it's supply chain, COVID, anomaly, inflation, but our folks and the consultants use a rolling FDOT average. Every job that FDOT bids out in the year in the whole state, they update the cost of curb, gutter, cost of sidewalk, cost of dirt, so they have a good idea what the projects will be, and that's the numbers that they use. I'll also say that FDOT projects almost always bid higher than our projects. We have escalators for asphalt and steel that we would be able to use as well. So I don't know how the projects are going to bid, whether these numbers that they have on here are correct, but we'll know this year as we have, in August, we'll be bidding Big Carlos, in June, Ortez, October, Littleton, and also in October, the Colonial Improvements. We have 4 projects coming up this year. We'll have a good idea if these numbers are correct. Still number 1 on the project list is the Three Oaks Parkway. The only change that we're going to have on this one is we have to make the Daniels widening section of this. We're going to jump that to the first portion we're going to do, and that's only to remain nimble. We asked FDOT a few years ago as they went through and changed out their interchanges along I-75. They did Corkscrew. They're currently working on Colonial. They were going to do a couple others, and we said, based on our timing, would you entertain doing Daniels? And they said yes in 2025. So we'd like to keep that portion as close as we can to 2025. You can see the budget of expense was 104, almost 105 million. The updated expense 156. We have an increase of 51 million. Interestingly, I put on the slide the original estimate back in 2006 was 31 million. So,
Randy, real quick, I'm sorry. Also, may want to point out that Daniels widening also goes in hand with the FDOT project for the I-75 and Daniels. Are they doing what, 22 million? You said they're doing 22 million, I believe.
The Daniels section alone is about 26 million.
And that's going with the FDOT project for I-75. They're redoing those ramps there too, so
Right.
they're funding some of that too.
That's what we're trying to do, because we'll have our 8 lanes will tie into their 8 lanes that they're constructing.
Right.
The Big Carlos Bridge replacement, the original estimate, you can see the updated estimate, and the difference is about 26 million. We have an FDOT, as a matter of fact, it was on the board agenda this morning, FDOT contribution of 25 million in years 26, 27, 28. The timing will be under construction hopefully this August. The resurfacing, countywide resurfacing hasn't changed dollar-wise. We still have 5 million in Lehigh Acres, 4 million countywide, and a selected arterial for $1 million a year. This is a picture of our resurfacing program that we use. The lighter colors are the worst roadways. The darker colors are the better. You can see Lehigh still is very light colors. Ortez Avenue, you can see the budget estimate, the updated estimate, and the difference of about 2 million. And we've coordinated with the city of Fort Myers on the Hanson Roundabout and at Ford Street. And we expect construction to happen in 2022 this year. We also have 2.175 million in state funding that we applied for and were granted. Star Boulevard again should end next month. I think we have ribbon cutting set up. That project we reduced from 6 phases to 4 phases, and we saved at least 5 years on that process. Littleton Road, the difference is about $487,000. We have a state grant, a SIGP grant, for $5 million. The timing, we're about to start construction in October of this year. We acquired joint drainage basins when we built the Littleton-Kismet realignment, which allowed us to use those same basins for this upcoming project, saved about a year in time. So we're considerably ahead of schedule there. Corkscrew Road, the difference is about 9.7 million. The timing is we should complete phase 1 in December 2023. We're going to start phase 2 this November. We'll have them both going at the same time. Overall completion should be December 2025. That's up to Alico. The Alico connector, the design is well underway on that. Phase 1 should begin in late 2023. Phase 2 should begin in 2025 with an overall completion by the end of 2027, we're hoping. By eliminating the PD&E, again, we saved almost 7 years on that timing. Cortez Avenue from Martin Luther King to Colonial, the updated project time begins in 2023. Colonial Boulevard safety improvements, that is doing a triple left turn on Summerlin onto Colonial. That should start later this year in October. I think the city's going to do some turn lane improvements on De Leon. That'll start later this year. We'll have an idea of some of the construction costs. Cape Coral Bridge, we were going to originally replace the westbound span, but again, we discussed earlier this year, we're going to go ahead and put a 3 lanes westbound, add a lane eastbound. Similarly, when we widen the midpoint, we'll do the same thing, ultimately giving almost a brand new 4-lane bridge in and out of Cape Coral. We're negotiating the design contract now, so the design build delivery method can be evaluated at the 60% design plans. I don't think it'll be feasible. There's a lot of properties we need to procure on each side of the bridge. In addition, on this project, as our designer got into it, he advises us that this will be about a 3-year design as it is. He advised us for another 9 months of design time and about $450,000, we can do a full PD&E, which doesn't add that much design time. It will enable us for complete federal funding if that opportunity arises 2 or 3 years from now. So we're probably going to go that direction as well. Colonial Boulevard, again, the midpoint bridge. We certainly can't start this bridge till the Cape Bridge is done. We're thinking probably 3 years for design, 3 years for construction on the Cape Bridge, and then we can start on the midpoint. We'll start the design and have it ready to go the minute the Cape Bridge is done. Veterans Parkway, again, this was reduced down to the Tier 2. And their Hickory Bridge replacements, so those bridges are in good shape. They're structurally sound, but they're like the Clusacci Bridge in Fort Myers. They have no shoulders, very thin lane widths, no pedestrian facilities. And again, the total difference is almost $200 million. That's it. Any questions? Thank you.
So Commissioners, we're back to the Tier 1 projects here, which you've discussed extensively. So the questions are you comfortable with the proposed priorities? Do you concur with those? And are there any other projects or questions that you have in relation to this?
Any comments or questions for staff? We answered all our questions already, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did. I think the sheet and the information is good. Really what prompted my conversation was I cheated a little bit and looked ahead and saw the $269 million increase. Pretty significant. You know, the other thing, this chart that y'all did is great, and it's almost like the chart on the last page, the second last page, where you have the funding source, construction date. I don't know if it's too ambitious or just not provide enough clarity if you do it on this entire list that's in front of us. I mean, it might become pretty unclear, but.
Sure.
Yes.
Commissioners, I don't want to overstate this, but I'm really concerned about inflation. I'm not so much worried about the operation and managing the operation. That's local property taxes, when you consider the value of properties and the kind of revenue that's going to be generated. I mean, the Revenue Estimating Conference for next year is talking about what, 10%, Pete? 10.4%.
And we did rollback last year.
And we did rollback last year. So, you're going to have a one-time infusion of funds because you instructed us to take general fund reserves above operating expense from 20% to 17%. So next year, you'll have a one-time infusion of those funds. But after that, we're now waiting for Congress passed the infrastructure bill, and that's $1 trillion. 60% of that money is going to be appropriated based on the normal process, Washington, Tallahassee, and then Tallahassee to projects. So we should be the recipients of some of that money. The other 40% of that $1 trillion is going to be competitive. It's going to be a federal competitive process. And we're not sure what that looks like just yet, but still, if we think that 8% inflation rate on these projects is going to continue for a couple of years yet, that's compounded. That's not just, that's just not just a straight 8%. So I am, if anything keeps me awake at night these days, it's that. It's having enough capital money to do the projects that we've been talking about for the last 6, 7, 8 years. So from this meeting, we really appreciate your conversation, but we do need to, we need to come back to you, I think, with some more information. I get the impression you're not prepared to change any of the order today on any of these projects, right? That being the case, then we'd like to go back and do some more analysis around cost, anticipated revenue, see if we can refine some of that a little bit, and then come back with another conversation in a couple of months with you.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your concerns. I think we're all having that concern. If you see in the private sector, look how inflation is affecting the private sector businesses, like everybody else is having to do payroll, down to, here, attainable housing, how much it costs.
Right.
I mean, it costs $200 million more to build a road. It costs more for somebody to live here. So all this filters back to each other. It's one society, one community, and as these prices keep going, we'll keep pricing ourselves up, and the housing prices keep going up. And it's just, it's got to stop somewhere. When's it going to stop? That's the big question. If we all knew that, we wouldn't be sitting here. But it's going to be interesting what happens over the next 6 months, over the next 2 years.
I agree. I think you summarized it very well, Roger. Definitely not prepared to make any changes today. So do I concur? Yep. I think we're pretty good with where things are proposed right now. I share your concerns about inflation. I am interested in how could we, as a county, better position ourselves to get some of that 40% competitive money down here. I mean, our folks who live here pay a lot into the federal treasury and taxes.
Yes, sir.
Would love to get their tax money come back down here and help alleviate some of these infrastructure problems and challenges that we have. What do you recommend we do to try and position ourselves in a way so that we can compete for those dollars and get them down here?
Glenn, do we have the answer to that question yet?
Roger, the White House just released a manual that describes some of the competitive processes that they're putting together, and at the end of the day, shovel-ready projects are going to be what it's about.
Shovel-ready.
So like Commissioner Hammond, Commissioner Pendergrass, I agree your sentiment, Roger, and if there's something that keeps me up, it's certainly inflation. And what I want to make sure we do is the priority you all set before I got here is employees first, and I want to make sure we do that. You know, I had this big macro picture of looking at all the pieces, and at some point in time, we get too far ahead and we're out of money. And that's just something I'm concerned about. The other thing that I'm looking forward to, and not that anyone is, but depending on what crystal ball you believe, the Fed has talked as many as 4 to 7 time increases in the Federal Reserve, which, you know, was really what they did in the 70s to try to slow this thing down. So, I mean, the reality is that starts to have impacts, and it's not going to be March's 25% basis points, but after 5 or 6, if they're truly going to do that, and if they have the courage and the will to do that, it'll slow this economy down very quickly. And that's what I'm looking forward to try to have the document I referred to is just looking at this more globally. I agree that the projects and the priorities, I think you've done a great job in doing that. We could peel the onion back a little bit more, just double check, maybe cross our T's, dot our I's. I don't think there's any changes, but maybe once over. And to Commissioner Hammond's point about, you know, maybe prioritizing what we want to see, you know, relative to that. I want to see that too, and how it all fits in together, because I want to make sure we're looking at this, and if there's a funding source that's available, it might accelerate the project a little bit quicker. And maybe we could talk about the merits of that. You know, so those types of discussions, I think we do well. But those are my thoughts.
Commissioner, we'll start a very robust planning effort on what can we get shovel-ready so that we'll be in a more competitive position.
Absolutely.
For the federal dollars.
I wonder if that Laco Road might be a candidate for that.
Could be.
And that's really where,
Glenn's
No.
going no.
No, because I was thinking about from a,
We do, you have to comply with all the federal requirements, which typically is a PD&E, and we forewent that for
Okay.
LECO. But the bridges bridges are a focus of the infrastructure package, so that's good news.
and that's where the creativity comes in. Pete's done a great job. Let's just look at every potential source and/or grant and/or money, and how do we put ourselves in the best position to capitalize on those? Couldn't agree more.
My final comment is, I think we drive these roads every day for the most part. We know where the checkpoints are, the choke points are, and that's where I start. You know, where do I see at my windscreen, you know, where it's at, and how do I prioritize that way? You know, and I think we're going to have to make some priorities. And it may be a delay, it may be, but if you look at Alico Road, I mean, whoever came up with that, I mean, it's given us a great ability to create a whole different diversity in our economy. We know where a lot of the communities are going. It's going east, we can't go any west and stuff like that, so.
the good thing, a lot of these projects are already done. I think when you see, for example, I know it's season right now, it's February, with or without spring training, it's busy, but you take Colonial, for example, once FDOT gets done with Colonial, for example, that's going to change that whole transportation grid within the area. And when you start seeing, we have a lot of this stuff already in the works. I think it's still, it's patience. You know, Corkscrew Road, you know, another 2 years, that's going to be, that first phase will be done. So I think once all this stuff is being done now, it's going to look, it won't be as bad as people think it is. But I will tell you, looking back in the 80s, I know Commissioner Mann and Roger remember sitting at Cleveland Colonial before there was a flyover for 30 minutes trying to cross 41 before there was a flyover. So looking back 40 years ago, it was worse back then. I think it is nowadays. I mean, I remember it used to take me an hour to go home in 1985 to go to Briarcliff at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 41 was 2 lanes south of College Parkway. So it took me an hour to get from downtown to down there, an hour at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There was no flyover at Cleveland Colonial. 41 was 2 lane after College Parkway. So we're better than what we used to be. It's just we're seeing this hyper growth right now because of what's happening up north. It's not going to stop probably for a few years. We just have to adapt to it though.
My concern is that who knows what this type of growth is going to mean. And, you know, hoping that things get better from what's already been done and hoping that things slow down a little bit so we can catch up with this. But my concern is outpacing us. We just simply can't keep up, you know, and if we can't keep up, it's going to lend itself to the cost of everything. So it's just like a waste energy plant. I mean, we're going to need it. It's 15 years out, but we got to we're starting now. Where's that going to go?
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
I want to make sure that we understand what you're expecting of us from this conversation. I have 4 things here. First one is we're going to keep current priority list intact for now. We're going to do more analysis around revenues and costs, as you've discussed. We're going to work on creating a process for making sure we've got shovel-ready projects that'll be able to compete for the federal dollars. And then you said you wanted to take a look at the MPO list of priorities as well and talk about that. Is that something you want us to help with, or do you want to just?
I mean, it's Commissioner Hammond's thought, and I think I don't want to be in his head and read his mind, but I think what I heard was looking at things that we collectively could work on and have this conversation. I enjoy the workshops immensely, and I think we get a lot done.
I agree. I mean, I think it'd be beneficial for us to hear from our staff, who I trust implicitly when it comes to transportation priorities, if they would break down. So commissioners, here's what the MPO transportation priorities look like. Here's how it affects your different districts in your county, and then we could give our thoughts on what we'd like to do, and then we could go to the MPO meetings with a clear strategy that the 5 of us would push together. Wow, I think that would make some real impact on the MPO.
And your point, to Commissioner Sandeli's point, we're responsible for the county, and we have to have the vision to look at the interchanges that connect, even though we don't have anything theoretically to do with those. Those impact us. So however we can think outside the box, we need to.
The other point about the MPO is, while Don Scott is a fantastic executive director, right? He doesn't have the same level of staff support that we have here at the county. You all have the ability to provide us with the information and the briefings that you do on county-related issues. I mean, we're well-educated before we ever get to any of these discussions even. It'd be great to go into the MPO meetings with that same level of knowledge.
Good with that? Everybody?
Great with what you summarized. Thank you.
I think Dave Lovell wants to say something.
To make the point from a timing standpoint, the MPO normally adopts their big list of priorities for the major road projects versus all the smaller funding sources in June, around June of every year. So that timing would work out well.
Great.
Again, I just want to thank staff, everybody. I know I feel like when we push you guys a lot over the years, a lot of these projects, everybody wants to see everything done. We all know transportation is one of the longest projects. A lot of the stuff we'll never see done in our careers. But I just say thank you for staff. I'm sorry, Randy and Rob, to bug you guys all the time about why the road's not done yet. But I understand, but I just want you to understand, we're out there with the community every day. We're seeing it and hearing it every day. So I want to thank staff. And Roger, your staff is amazing.
Thank you, sir.
For everything they do, and just trying to adapt to everything and try to make everybody happy. We can't make everybody happy. We're trying to, though. And one day, I hope we'll get that roundabout done in Commissioner Mann's district out there, what is it, Gunnery Road and Buckingham Road, that V circle, that pie out there. Yeah.
Randy?
Yeah, I'd like to thank this board for not changing gears over the last 5-6 years. You've had pretty much the same set of priorities, and we appreciate that. We're working on the first 10. If you were to change gears now, we'd have to re-permit, and permits only good for 5 years. The design standard change, we'd have to put a 6-foot sidewalk instead of 5-foot sidewalk. So you've made it pretty easy on us as well, and I thank you.
I was asked this last week, and I sent word to Randy, tell us what the answer was to Stringfellow and Matt Lachey.
Who?
Stringfellow and Matt Lachey. The question was, why are we not moving toward a roundabout there? Has that been discussed? Has it been a community issue? Or are you hearing about it? Are you hearing about it?
Yes, we met with the Civic Association and Pine Island Chamber of Commerce about 4 or 5 months ago, had a nice discussion with them. Last time we went out there, 5 or 6 years ago, we got chased out. They wanted the claim of fame as one of the only communities in Florida without a traffic signal. So the traffic signal was down, we weren't running. So we developed, now the need is really there. So we've developed both a roundabout and a traffic signal. We presented them both to the Chamber of Commerce and the Civic Association. They're looking at it. We're looking at rights of way that would need to be purchased. So we're looking at. We'll probably be ready to bring that to you as a project to be considered here probably the next year.
Well, I ain't further, again, it's not my district, I would yield to the district commissioner when you're hearing stuff, but I had no answer as to whether it's even being
I
looked at.
appreciate you bringing it up. Both Randy and I went there together collectively and listened, and, you know, as you said, we didn't get tomatoes thrown at us, so I guess it's a good step in the right direction.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger, thank you, we'll be adjourned.
Yes, sir.